Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to build a primitive water filter, and this will absolutely work 100% of the time. It's going to filter out some of the really nastiest stuff you find in waters. I'll give you two alternative things that you can do in addition to using this primitive water filter. But what I'm going to talk about today can be done if you're lost on the trail, if you run out of water while you're camping and you have an emergency situation around your home. If you live near a forested area, this will come in really handy for emergency water. So I don't know if you can see the dripping right here, but this particular vine, I know exactly what it is. And I'm going to tell you how to turn it into a very productive and safe water filter. Now I cut this vine, and this is about a 1-inch vine, as you can see, and I cut this about 2 or 3 days ago, and it has been slowly producing filtered water for that amount of time. Now there's a very specific setup you need to do in making this type of filter, but this just proves my concept, and this is a very old concept. It was done probably originally by Native Americans, but this particular vine is called muscadine. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to have any type of toxic vine. You have to know what type of vine you're dealing with. So if you're unfamiliar with what you're about to use for your water filter, make sure that you don't use it until you've identified the exact vine. In the wintertime, this is very hard to identify because there's no leaves on it. I personally know this is a muscadine because I've collected muscadines from the vine itself. Now what I did below the vine on the ground, just below it there, I put an area where I could catch the dropping water. In a little bit over 48 hours, we have 1 solid gallon, and it's actually overfilling, so I'm not actually sure how much it produced. But as you can see, the gallon jug is completely filled to the top. And so I just basically did that. I just put this setup right here, there, but I'm going to show you how to make a specific water filter that you can be a little bit more portable and you can carry with you. So this is a great way if you're in the forest and you need water, you're not desperately dying of water, you thirst, you can set something like this, and in just a matter of hours you would probably have at least 1 cup of water to drink. And over a period of a day or two, you would probably have more water than you could even drink. You would be able to just transport it with you. Now I hope I'm in view here because I've set my camera off to the side, but this is a muscadine vine. It's been growing directly over my property for a while, right at the fence line. And I'm going to pull this down and cut this into certain lengths. But what I would recommend, something about the size of a pencil to create this effectively. Of course, the larger muscadine vine that I showed you is even faster and better. But if you're on the trail and you need something a little more quickly, you can multiply these vines and absolutely have a fast flowing water. One thing to remember is when you cut them, you need to remember which side is flowing from the ground to the top of the vine. So make sure you don't flip these around. Make sure you remember bottom to top. So just make sure as you cut each one that you keep it in the correct position, moving the water upward. Now right now I'm just showing the how-to, but I've got a bulleted list of things that you need to know when you're doing this, some really important facts. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take some of this really nasty standing water I found, and it looked like it had been there for quite a while. And so it's got a lot of algae in it, it's got a lot of debris in it, but this is the actual piece of the vine that I cut and that I showed you. But what you need to do is like most of these vines may not have this arch to it, but what you can do is very slowly move it like that into a position where it's taking the water from one glass, or whether you're using a camping mug or whatever you're using, cookware kit, and move it into the other glass. So we don't want it knocking everything over, so we want to kind of arch it like that. So I'm going to take some wire, and you can use emergency cord, string, anything you got on hand, and create that really steep arch. I'm going to cut that, put it on one side. Pretty simple method. We just want to make sure, and maybe even you might consider putting your jar that you're taking your contaminated water, putting up a little bit higher than your secondary jug. And I'm going to try to do this without snapping the vine, or else I'll have to go cut another piece of it. I'm just going to slowly do that. Remember, it's more likely to crack and break if you do something really quickly, so just slowly pull it across like that. And whatever type of wire or cord you're using, just create this arch here. If I keep from hitting myself in the face with it. All right. Now we've got 2 pieces. Now this is the end that was coming out of the ground, and this is the end. You can see it's still wet. A lot of moisture came out in the last 2 days from that. So what we want to do is we want to put our uncontaminated side into our clean jar, and our other side into that jar, and we're going to let this just slowly process the water. We'll see what we have in a short amount of time. Also, you may want to elevate this where it's not touching the bottom of the jar, so you can actually see it producing the water, dripping slowly. Takes a little bit to do that, but once it gets started, it's great. Now I'm going to show you how to do this with much smaller vines. From the same vine, we're using muscadine, but I'm going to give you a list of different things that you can use safely. But just remember, if you don't know what you're using, you need to avoid this process altogether. All right, so I've had this set up in my mason jar for about 45 minutes, close to an hour maybe, but you can see that we've created quite a bit of pure, clean water from our green algae type water that has no telling what else growing in it. But if you look closely, you can see it there. There is a slow drip coming across. Like I said, this particular method, I had it kind of propped up there, this particular method on a larger branch is going to be much slower than the next method I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how to take the same vine and speed the process up of filtering water quite a bit. Okay guys, I've pulled down a really long section of the muscadine. I'm going to cut these into specific lengths, go into the greenhouse, and I'll show you how to turn this into a much faster filter. The filtration we were watching earlier was maybe 1 drop every 3 to 5 seconds. So it was dripping pretty good. It was going at a pretty steady pace. So over a period of a day or two, you're going to have a lot of water created, especially if you can find multiple vines in an area. If you're lost in the wilderness and you have no water, no way to drink pure water, then this is a great emergency solution to getting water if you can recognize the type of vine that you're taking it from. Again, there can be toxic vines, so just make sure that you have a little bit of knowledge of exactly what you're cutting. But I'm going to show you another type of filter from a totally different plant that is completely safe and easy to recognize for 99.9% of the people watching. Now this is the same muscadine vine, just a smaller part that I showed you pulling down from the tree. And what we want to do is we want to cut this in about 2.5 to 3 foot sections. Remember, if you cut it too short, when you bend it over whatever type of containers you're using, it's going to snap. Even if it's green and very pliable when you first fill it, that really sharp bend is going to cause a snap, I would think. So 2 to 3 feet is the ideal length for these. And I've got enough of this, probably 25, 30 feet of vine, to create quite a few of these. And that's the key to speeding up water production when you're on the trail, lost, or have an emergency situation. Now I only cut 4 of these, but you're not limited to that. You could cut 40 or 400 depending on how many water containers you have, how big they are. And just remember, you don't want to forget the water flow direction from the ground to the top of the vine. So we've only got 4 here. I'm going to show you how to do this with just 4 of these, and then we'll move on to the next plant or tree that I'm going to show you that can do the same thing and filters out the water. Now if you're wondering, is this safe? Is this proven? Yes, MIT did a study. If you look up online, MIT study with grapevines or water filtration, something like that. Or I think the other publication was Science Today. So take a look at both of those online. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description if I can still find the articles. But this is a scientific method, a very ancient and primitive method to filtering water really cleanly. Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing with these. I'm going to put all these together and try to make them at the exact same level because I don't want them mismatched there. So they're all about the same length. I'm going to slowly bend these as to not snap them. Maybe we can get that close together. Then I'm going to take some of my, actually this is bonsai wire that I use around the greenhouse. So as you can see, it bends pretty good. And I'm going to wrap this wire around there. I probably should have cut it first before I started trying to wrap it there. We're going to cut that. And bonsai wire cuts very easily, but you could use paracord, anything you got, a shoestring, anything you have on the trail that you might be able to use to create this arching effect. And then I'm going to take the other side, do the exact same thing. I'm going to let them come out just a little bit because I want them to be in 2 separate containers. We're going to wrap this around the other side. I'm hoping I'm on camera here because I cannot see the screen from where I'm standing. And make sure you wrap it because you don't want this coming back and snapping you in the face. That's already happened once in the few minutes I've been putting this stuff together. So there you have it. You have your bottom and your top. You should remember where that's at because water flow may still work, but it's going to be slowed down quite a bit. So this is our water flow direction here. We're going to put this in 2 separate containers. One container is going to be contaminated and the other side will wait for some clean, clear water to come through. And again, this is going to probably work faster because you're using multiple parts of the vine. The larger one is only using one part of the vine. Of course, it is much larger, but these you could do 50 at one time. You could do 25 at one time and have a steady flow of clean water moving through this vine. All right, I'm gonna put in our really nasty unfiltered water that I would not drink. It's got a lot of algae in it. And then I'm gonna put that into our first container. I would recommend that you may need to elevate this so it will drip properly. I'm going to kind of lean it to one side so we can actually see the dripping mechanism in our filtered side. So just give it some time. Again, to get started, it doesn't happen instantly. It's not like turning on a faucet, but over time you'll have some very good, very clear water coming out the other side. Now, while I'm waiting on this process to take place, because it's not instant like I just said, these branches, these grapevine or wild grapevine branches, contain something called xylem. That is a microscopic system that runs through the complete area of each vine, and it slowly has a capillary action of pulling water through it so it can get to the leaves and the fruit, or in this case the wild grapes. So anyways, that's what the scientific reason. I think I just saw a drop come out on that side, but anyways, that is the scientific reason this works at purification. Now, when you're pulling these vines down from the tree, you want to make sure that the vines are fresh, they look healthy. If you're in the winter time, you can take your thumbnail and scratch it. If you see a little bit of green right up under the surface, the vine is still alive. This will not work with a dead or dying vine or part of the branch. So often vines will discard part of the branch that's not being productive. It may be in too much shade. But as you can see, in just a short amount of time, we've got water flowing, and it's taking it from this really green algae to a very pure, clear water. But I'm going to talk about how you can make sure this is protected. Now, you're going to be removing some of the much larger particles, but what if there's a virus in the water? What would you do then? So getting rid of viruses are a whole different thing, because sometimes they might be able to make it through. If you're using really, really filthy water that has very suspicious things growing in it, I'd recommend having this in your backpack. This is a reused, I used it was originally had garlic in it, but I thoroughly cleaned it out, and now I have bleach in it. It's just a dropper. What they recommend by the CDC is using about 8 drops of water per gallon to kill any viruses in there. So this might filter out bacteria, but possibly viruses might get through it. So that's what you need to have in your backpack, is just a small, very small container of bleach to make sure you can purify the water even more. Most of the time, viruses are not extremely common in water, but they are there from time to time. So that's one more method you could use to make sure the water is completely safe to drink if you're lost in the forest. Now, let's say for a second you had no bleach and you were in the forest and you were lost and you had no other alternative than to drink the very suspect water once it's filtered, because you're still afraid there could be a virus in there that might have made it through the vine. Take some firewood and make some charcoal like this. You can make charcoal pretty easy. I've got a video about how to make charcoal. I'll link it right here. But if you can make some charcoal, smash this into much smaller pieces, and then you want to put it into some type of filter. Now, this was I think a 1 liter, 2 liter bottle, something like that. You're going to punch very small holes in it. At the bottom, you could use a cattail, or you could use cloth right here. And so this will filter out very well a lot of those microparticles that the vine may let get through. If you've ever used any type of water filtration system in your home, you'll know that they use charcoal to filter water. My home system right now that I have actually has a charcoal filter in it. So that would be one more step to making sure the water is safe as it could be. Perhaps, maybe you've got your water container that you have on your camp, water bottle, whatever, and this is all you have, but you don't have any water, then this method would further purify your water before you drank it. Now, last year we were on a camping trip with several other people, and we talked about best ways to get water if you're lost in the forest and you've ran out of water. And so this idea came up among the group, and I'd heard about this from my dad maybe 35, 40 years ago, that this is how Native Americans would filter water if they were in an area where they had no clean drinking water. They could do it safely if there was a lot of contaminated water. So again, I went ahead and did this last year, same test, because I was very curious about how well it worked. I never tried it before. I sent the results off to a lab, and I got the results back. The microbial load was 0. There were no viruses detected, so the water was pure enough to drink. So This will work in an emergency, and it's a little bit slow, it's a little bit time consuming, but when you run out of water and you're hiking on the trail, this is a lifesaver, especially if it's the dead of summer. Now, there's a couple of times where this may not work too well. If you're in a drought situation, there hasn't been rain in the area in a long time, the flow rate may be slowed down quite a bit in the vines. Also, if it's really cold part of wintertime, the vines may have slowed down to the point where they're not moving water through because they don't need to. The leaves have all fallen off the vine. So that comes back to what we're going to talk about doing next, is a particular tree you can use to do this exact same process. So a little bit crammed in here, but anyways, pine is the other tree, the tree we're talking about. Instead of vines, you could use a pine tree. The vines I was talking about grow predominantly in the southeast, but pines grow almost everywhere across the country and actually across the world. They have an extremely small pore system, so they'll filter out the water properly. We're going to do the test on this, as we said earlier, our little cap, and I'm going to cut a piece that fits very closely into the end of this, but I'll show you exactly how to put it in there and make sure it doesn't leak out too quickly. So this is our part of our pine branch, and we need to remember that water flow needs to be exactly as it was on our vine. The water's going to be flowing this way up towards the branches. So what we want to do is we want to place it in our contribution tank or our contaminated water tank. We want to put it there and then have it flowing into our collection device. I'm going to use this as our contaminated water device. You can use your mug or whatever you're carrying in your gear when you're camping. But remember, there's one specific thing we need to do this. First, I need to take this outside and clean off all the excess branches first. Now, whatever size container you're using, whether it's something really small like this 2-liter container or some much larger size, you're going to have to cut the pine branch at just the right size. But what we need to do is we need to remove the bark off of the end that's going to go into our contaminated water. You need to remove anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 inch. The total length in this needs to be anywhere from 8 to 12 inches. And I'll show you a way where you can keep it from making a mess everywhere and spilling out too quickly. So we're just cutting this back just enough so this can be exposed, and we're going to place this in our top there. Now it's wedged in pretty good there, but in order to keep water from leaking out, our contaminated water, I'm going to put tape around this. I have various types of tape around the greenhouse, but if you didn't, you could melt wax on it if you were on the trail. If you happen to have some emergency candles, you could do lots of different things, but just whatever you do, you want to stop this up so no water is coming through, so we can get it from this device, our contaminated device, into our clean collection device. Now, I mentioned putting wax in there, but if you didn't have wax and you still had a little bit of a gap there where water was leaking out, you could seal this with pine resin. You could take some, put it on the inside and the outside, and kind of force it up in there. Very waterproof substance, and that would prevent any leaking, because we're going to have this standing on its end and the water is going to be coming out into our collection device. I actually feel a little bit of moisture there on the bottom already. But I'm lucky enough to have in the greenhouse just some plain old electrical tape. So I'm going to put that around there until I feel like it's going to be really sealed and we don't have any leaking. So again, if you have emergency candles, you could melt that wax on the inside and the outside. You could use pine resin. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have some great ideas in the audience of other things you could use to prevent this from leaking out. But as of right now, I'm just using this electrical tape. I'm going to run it down the branch a little bit to make sure we've cut off all the moisture flow, and then we're going to set it up and try to filter some really nasty algae water. Okay, I've added our green algae water to our top here, our collection, our contaminated water device. Our clean gallon-sized water bottle is down below. We're going to see how quickly that comes through. But again, you could use any size bottle. You could just use your camping size bottles. If you're just on the trail and you only have maybe 1 or 2 small bottles, you could go from a bottle to a camping mug like this one. So you're not confined to doing exactly the way I'm doing it, but I'm just trying to give you the principle that might save your life when you're on the trail and you can't find any water. Now, after a little bit of time has passed, I think there's a little bit of water collecting in there. Of course, you might have a little bit of coloration from the bark from the pine as well. So there is water slowly working its way through. I can see it actually dripping in there right now. I don't know if you can see that. But it does take a little bit of time to make its way through the branch. But this, they say white pine is best. I'm not exactly sure the variety of this pine. It could be loblolly. I'm not 100% sure. Or shortleaf, I think. But anyways, that is how it slowly makes its way through the pine branch and filters out our really dirty water. So guys, depending on what you have growing in your area, and pines grow almost everywhere across the country, US, these grow predominantly, I believe, in the southeast. I'm not sure if muscadines grow in the north. If they are, if you'll let me know in the link in the description. But I've always assumed it was a southeastern wild grape is what we call it, muscadine, but it's referred to also as the wild grape. So guys, I really appreciate you watching. If you have a question about this video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first. I have a Patreon that has a lot of free and paid content on it. So if you'd like to become a member there, you don't have to necessarily pay. You could just join for free. There is some downloadable PDFs on different projects I've done. So guys, this is a very simple way to do something. It's a good skill to have when you're in the forest, just in case you're lost or something happens, you run out of water. Really could be a lifesaver. So guys, thanks for watching and have a great day.